Joshua. Not a bad name. In fact, it's quite a good name. Only problem is that there are 5 billion Joshuas out there. So, to my future wife, who may or may not be watching this, first of all, love you, honey. And second of all, no, we will not be naming our son Joshua. What follows are my initial thoughts and reactions to this book of the Bible. I have not done any outside research regarding the more challenging or problematic passages of Christian scripture. Therefore, do not take whatever criticisms I may make in this video as my final word on the passage or verse in question. I am very likely going to be doing a Bible Revisited series addressing my different issues with the Bible, book by book, after conducting ample outside research. So now, without further ado, let's jump into the review. So the book of Joshua is a book in the Old Testament, and it comes right after Deuteronomy, and it is written by Joshua. At least we believe most of it's written by Joshua anyways. And it pretty much details the events of the Israelites conquering the Promised Land. If you'll remember, at the end of Deuteronomy, the Israelites had just reached the Promised Land, and now Joshua is leading them into the Promised Land and taking over Jericho and all these other cities and basically settling in the Promised Land. And yeah, that's pretty much what most of Joshua is about. There's a part towards the end where it's just Joshua dividing the land among the Israelites, the land that they had conquered. But most of Joshua really is just like a bunch of battles and a bunch of wars. The Israelites conquering other peoples. My overall thoughts on Joshua, if you've been watching these Old Testament videos, then you will know that pretty much since the book of Genesis, if I'm remembering correctly, I've had mixed feelings about every book of the Bible, or of the Old Testament since then. And Joshua is no exception. Joshua has some really cool, awesome things in it, and some stuff where I'm like, that doesn't seem like it fits in the Bible. And also, there's almost like I think a very obvious contradiction in Joshua. A lot of the problems I have with Joshua are problems that I've had in Deuteronomy and previous books of the Old Testament. Yeah, so that's what I would say regarding Joshua. It's an interesting book, obviously, as is every book of the Bible. But it is by no means my favorite. Absolutely not. Now let's jump into the review, discussion, and analysis of the different passages and parts of Joshua that I would really like to dig into and, maybe get to the bottom of. First, I would like to talk about the Israelites conquering Jericho. It's a famous story. They march around Jericho for 7 days, one time each day, and then on the 7th day, it's like they march 7 times. Everyone shouts, the walls fall down, they take the city of Jericho, and they basically slaughter everyone, but they keep Rahab the prostitute alive because she helped the Israelite spies previously. And the story of Jericho, I think, is really pretty cool. From what I understand, we found the city of Jericho, and guess what? The city's walls had fallen outwards, just like in the Bible. And I think, I may be wrong about this, but I think Jericho is actually on a fault line, which is another interesting thing. Which perhaps lends credibility to the story. I like the way it starts, where this is Joshua chapter 5, verse 13 to 15. This is just how the fall of Jericho begins. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. That's just a pretty cool opening to the whole situation surrounding Jericho. I just had to point that out. And I gotta say, I really appreciate the whole story of Rahab and how they don't like stone her or do any of the stuff that is the penalty for prostitution. They protect her, actually. She's like the only, Rahab and her family and stuff, the only people in Jericho that survive. Now chapter 7 of Joshua I want to talk about, because There's one particular passage, verses 20 through 26. Seems like an apparent contradiction to me, particularly in contradiction to what is said in Deuteronomy. But this has to do with Achan and his sin. If you remember in the text, no one was supposed to take any of the plunder from Jericho. Everything of Jericho was supposed to be destroyed. And, Achan ends up stealing some stuff anyways, taking some stuff for himself out of Jericho. And this is what happens to him. Achan replied, "It is true, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver and a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath." So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent, with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold wedge, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, "Why have you brought all this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today." Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore that place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since. Clearly, there's some serious brutality here going on. My issue is this whole passage, the punishment that's applied not just to Achan, but to his family and his sons and daughters. It seems like they punish the children for the sins of the father, which in Deuteronomy says that is not okay. This seems like a contradiction in the Bible. The punishment does not seem just, according to what is outlined in Deuteronomy, and I'll prove it. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 16. "Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sin." And then obviously where you read in the passage we just read, it says, "Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold wedge, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Achor. And then all Israel stoned him. And after they had stoned the rest," so they stoned the kids, they stoned the sons and daughters for the sin of the father. I don't see how that's not a contradiction. If anyone cares to explain how this is not a contradiction, obviously do so in the comments section below. Now moving on to Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 through 14. I'd just like to read this passage because it's super cool. "On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, 'O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Ajalon.' So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel." As I said, it's just cool. I just had to read it because it's one of those things that, the day the day the sun stood still. Everyone knows that line, and that's where it came from. Now, the other kind of problem I have with the book of Joshua, and this is something I've had a problem with it in a lot of the Old Testament books, but in Joshua, this sentiment is repeated over and over and over again. And this is having to do with pretty much all of the cities that Joshua and the Israelites conquer, those that do not surrender. For example, I'm only going to use one example here, but this kind of carries over for many of the battles that they wage in this book. This is going to be verse 14. "The Israelites carried off for themselves all the plunder and livestock of these cities, but all the people they put to the sword until they completely destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed." Here's the thing. Now that sentiment, not sparing anyone that breathed, total destruction, all that, is rampant in the book of Joshua. And it's there in other books of the Old Testament that we've already talked about on this channel. My problem, as with the problems I've had with past books in the Old Testament, is it's saying not sparing anyone that breathed. So what that means, it seems to me, is that they slaughtered babies. They slaughtered infants. They slaughtered 5-year-olds. Kids that, I mean, they have no, you know, their fathers, this is all out of their control. If their fathers don't surrender the city, why is it the kid's fault? It says not sparing anyone that breathed. There is no asterisk there saying, but children were, saved. That's not here in the book. And so all the explanations that people have for how, it's somehow not the slaughtering of children, I don't see how that can be the case. It seems to me that it's quite definitive, over and over and over again in Joshua, that no one was spared. Nothing that breathed survived. So it seems to me that the Israelites just killed kids, little girls, little boys, infants, babies in their mother's arms, and it just seems evil. Yeah, it's very troubling to me that this is rampant throughout the book of Joshua and the Old Testament. They killed a bunch of kids is what it seems like. And obviously if people out there have an explanation for how this is not the case, or somehow in some way that it was just, then leave, your explanation in the comment section below. So ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts and feelings about the whole book of Joshua, and on the specific passages and verses that I found worthwhile talking about for the purposes of this review. Yeah, as I said at the beginning of the video, I have mixed feelings about Joshua. And obviously, I haven't gone ahead and done all the research and the digging that I need to do regarding these things, these troublesome verses and passages. But it seems to me, at least some of these, that they'll always be troublesome. And that is troubling to me. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, enough of my thoughts and feelings about the book of Joshua. I now want to know what you thought of the book of Joshua. If you've read it and you've got thoughts and feelings about it, please leave those thoughts and feelings in the comment section below. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe. Tell your friends about the channel. And never forget to